Hello, everybody. In this episode, we have on a lady named Shawn. Shawn is the founder of a program called LITT, L-I-T-T. It stands for Love in the Trenches. You may have heard me reference this in previous podcasts. Basically, it's a nonprofit that helps families and loved ones navigate addiction, and it's a support group, and they help a lot of people. Now, if you don't make it the whole way to the end of this episode, which I hope that you do, I wanted to leave you with this. It is a nonprofit. So with that being said, if you want or feel compelled to leave a donation for them, they need donations in order to operate, to offer the grief counseling, so on and so forth that they offer people. You can go to loveinthetrenches.org. There is an opportunity for you to donate there. They could use all the help that you can get. We know that you're going to get enjoyment out of this episode. It's going to help you navigate yourself so you can better navigate your loved ones. So enjoy the show. All right, let's roll.
Okay.
Ready, Ben?
I'm definitely ready.
You ready, Shawn?
I'm ready.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What is happening, everyone?
And we also have Shawn.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Shawn.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use, and thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Ben, I got an email on that this morning.
I saw that. You forwarded it to me.
Yeah, you would have gotten it too if you had that email activated.
Maybe if I had the password. Maybe you're holding the password hostage.
No, I sent it all to you.
What?
Yeah, you have it.
It's probably in my spam.
No, check your text thread. It's definitely in your text messages. I think. I'll double check. But if you have any issues that you need help with, or you want to communicate with Ben and I, the easiest way to get a hold of us is just to email us at info@realrecoverytalk.com. What we'll do is ask you for your phone number, phone number, Ben. And we're going to have a conversation with you about your current situation and see if we can assist in any sort of way.
Can I say something about that email real quick?
Sure.
I just love the fact that this email in particular, it really wasn't asking us anything. It was telling us that the individual that listened to one of our episodes was actually putting into practical application some of the suggestions, such as listening to the Joe and Charlie tapes. What was the other part of it?
He subscribed to Mind Pump.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, but basically just saying like, hey, I've done this. I can't believe no one's ever brought this up before. I just love the fact that somebody's actually taking action and utilizing it to do something. Yeah. You know, as opposed to just hearing it and, oh, that's good info, but like, because it makes a difference.
Well, this particular person is 2 months sober, and he said that he's tried getting sober multiple times, and he's got 2 months now, and he's been actively listening to the Joe and Charlie tapes because that was a suggestion that Ben made a couple episodes ago anyway. So, yeah, if you haven't been listening to Joe and Charlie tapes, by all means, you should. Shawn, have you heard of Joe and Charlie tapes?
No, I was just going to ask you, what are the Joe and Charlie tapes?
Ben?
So Joe and Charlie, couple old guys. Are they deceased? We Googled it last time.
I would imagine they are because
Probably.
they met in 1970-something.
So they're two guys that had an equal love for the big book. They actually met in an Al-Anon meeting.
Okay.
But they were both in recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous. And because of their equal love for the big book, they sat down, studied it together. And they ended up doing basically a tour, if you will. And this went on the rest of their lives, but they are really well known. You can find them on.
That's fascinating. Okay.
If you type in Joe and Charlie, whether you're on Spotify, podcast apps, YouTube, like they pop up. They're on all the recovery apps, like the My Spiritual Toolkit. But it's a very simple 12-hour. Takes you all the way through the big book, paragraph by paragraph, and just the way they explain everything is so palatable and understandable that, I mean, for me, it was life-changing. Probably if I had to give credit to the majority of my knowledge in recovery, if I had to say what gave me the most knowledge, I would honestly say those.
Okay.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
I mean that, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it, Shawn. We're here. You decided to fly in from Maryland, right?
Baltimore. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Shawn, and I'll do a brief introduction. Shawn is the co-founder of an organization called LITT, LITT. And fun fact that Ben and I, or primarily me, I was calling it by the wrong name for a while.
A lot of people do.
I was calling it Living in the Trenches.
No, it's Love in the Trenches.
And it's Love in the Trenches. And somebody actually from the LITT organization had texted me and said, it's Love in the Trenches, not Living. So, but at any rate, co-founder of this program, LITT, and there's another program, and we're going to get into it, that's called Undo the OD, which I find pretty fascinating. But we'll talk about that a little bit. But it's organic conversation,
sure,
non-scripted. I don't have a list of questions that I want to ask you. We just see where it goes.
Okay, well, I'm happy to tell you how we got started, which I'm very proud of how we got started.
Yeah, let's start there.
We're only 4 years old, and we're growing like crazy. And but it started because, of course, my son was active in his addiction for a number of years. He's now been in recovery for some time, but those were the worst years of my life when he was active in his addiction, and when he started to want to be drug-free, and it took him another year and a half of basically relapsing every 90 days. So I watched that struggle. I watched how much he wanted it and how hard it was for him to do it. I watched him go through 7 recovery programs. He was homeless for a period of time. It was really horrible, and I was alone. And as my son moved into recovery, one of my oldest friends contacted me because her son was now having issues. He had been in recovery also, but had relapsed at 40. So we started meeting for coffee. We were the only 2 people we knew that really could relate to one another, because this is such a secret so often in families. So we started meeting, and then sadly she lost her son. So we have, one mom whose son's in recovery and one mom who loses her son. And we started getting phone calls from people, what do I do? People were willing to come out to us because we had been through the worst of it. And not long after her son passed, we decided that we needed to be there for parents, because you need a support system. And it's such a damn secret. And you don't know where to go with it. And your health is threatened, and your marriage is threatened, and your other children are angry. And it's just a mess. So we called a few people who had called us, and we met in my living room with 15 parents. And it just took off. So now we have the meetings by Zoom. We have people from all over the country. We have someone from Sweden. We have people from Canada. They all come to our Zoom meetings. But it's 2 moms who have seen this from both ends, recovery and no recovery. And it's just, I just think of it as the safety net for parents. No matter what happens, we can't predict what's going to happen with our children, but we can be there for you. And sadly, we have had some parents who are in our regular support group for parents whose children are active or in recovery, and they've had to move to our grief groups because there's been a loss. But we are the safety net. We very smoothly can wrap our arms around them through that loss. And then we have incredible grief support groups run by people who have experienced the same thing. And that's where we are. And then we broke into the Undo the OD program as well. We branched out into that as well.
So before we go in that direction, if somebody wants to get involved in LITT, how would they go about that?
Just go to our website. There's a lot of information on our website. It's loveinthetrenches.org. And if you don't do .org, you're going to end up learning a lot about World War II. So loveinthetrenches.org. And there are inquiry forms. You can inquire about general support. If you're worried about your child, if your child is active in their addiction, if your child has moved into recovery, but you're still uneasy. If you need support and your child has been sober for a couple years, that's fine. You can join that support group. If you've lost a child, we work with you with some counseling. It's free, and then move you into a support group as well. So yeah, just go to our website. There's a blog. There's a lot of information on there. Our story about how we started, the different programs we're involved in. A lot of our community service work, it's all on there. Lots of information.
You guys do yoga too or something?
We do. We have a mom who, wonderful mom. She's in Sweden, and she both lost a child and has another child in recovery right now. And we met her after she lost her child. And she is a certified yoga instructor with lots and lots of certifications I don't understand. So she does a live Zoom yoga class for all of our members once a month, and then it stays on our website. And it's very focused on calming your mind, calming the mind, and moving through your day peacefully. And our members love it. And so we have that. We even have a walking group, moms and dads. We're not just for moms. We've got plenty of dads. We'd love to have more. But we have a walking group that meets in Baltimore for our local people. We try and keep people together in contact. We've seen wonderful friendships form across the country between two parents who have, are experiencing something similar, and they kind of connect in our meetings and they stay in touch. So yeah, we're trying to network people. We're trying to let people know that you're not alone in this, because you feel very alone in this as a parent, very alone.
That's pretty fascinating. I mean, it's kind of like Joe and Charlie, Ben.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yep.
Two moms came together and formed this organization. The one thing that you said that I wanted to hone in on a little bit, unless, Ben, did you have something you want to say?
I do, but you go first.
All right.
I'm curious.
I want to spend just a few minutes on, you said something about health being impacted, marriages being impacted, and there was another thing being impacted, but
sibling relationships also are a big part of the problem.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
So I can give you my personal experience. I got very sick, and my marriage nearly ended. When my son was really active and it was so bad that he was homeless, I was coming out of my mind. I was just out of my mind, which is normal. My adrenaline was up and I wasn't eating right and I couldn't take care of myself. But what was even worse than what I was doing to myself was what I was doing to the rest of my family. I have a wonderful husband, but for whatever reason, I was looking for where to put the blame. And the first place you go is yourself. And so you hate yourself. Let's start there. You hate yourself when you are the mother of an addict. But then I would get angry and blame my husband, and I would blame my daughter. They weren't doing what they needed to do to keep him safe, and I was angry. And my marriage came very close to ending, really did. But we were able to repair that. We were able to understand that you moved through this. I moved through this disease with my son at one pace, and my husband moved through it at another. So we weren't coming to an understanding about the illness at the same time. And that also fosters a lot of anger. When I was saying he's sick, he's addicted to heroin, he's addicted to meth, he's addicted to this, my husband was saying, and there was some truth to it, no, he has mental illness. If we cure the mental illness, the addiction will go away. And all this misinformation that we had, and we're coming at it differently. But with my daughter, I'm much guiltier because she's the opposite of my son in many ways. They were very close. She was angry. She was beginning her life. She was finishing graduate school. She was getting her first apartment. She was meeting the man that she would fall in love with and marry. And I could not feel an ounce of joy for her. Not an ounce of joy. I was too consumed with her brother, who I thought I was going to lose any minute. And I got to the point where I was very angry with her, unreasonably, but very angry. And every time she would tell me about something wonderful happening in her life, I'd be, why don't you care about your brother? Don't you understand what's going on with your brother? We're going to lose your brother. Don't you care what's wrong with you? I was vicious. I really was. And I don't think all parents get there, but I am completely ashamed of how I responded to her and treated her, and my lack of willingness to participate in her joy because I was so overwhelmed with my own sadness. And I am very, very lucky that we were able to repair our relationship. Very, very lucky. And I also had to be patient. When your child goes into recovery and they're asking for forgiveness and they're making amends, most parents are going to go, it's okay, whatever. I'm just glad I've got you here. I'm okay with it. But a sibling takes a little longer to forgive. And he had hurt her and she was furious. And so I kept trying to repair that relationship, which was none of my business. When I finally stepped back and let them have control of that relationship, they healed. They healed very organically, slowly, over time, as it should have been. But in the meantime, in the early stages, I was like, you need to forgive him. You need to understand him. No, she doesn't. She needs to move at her own pace. So I really fractured my family, really, really fractured my family. And some families don't recover. I was very lucky that we were all willing to come together and go, okay, let's start over. We're going to start over.
Hang on. There's one more thing I want to say before you go. I'm going to reference broken bones here because you said something that just sparked in my mind. You said you fractured your family. But we know, well, at least I've been told. So I'm no doctor, but I have broken my fair share of bones. That when you break a bone and it heals, it's the strongest part of that bone.
It absolutely is.
So where I was going, and I think we know where this is going, you fractured your family, but how is it now?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I have said this and people look at me like I've lost my mind. My son's illness was a gift.
Yep.
And I know that sounds crazy. And I would, on some level, of course, I wish he never had to go through that. It was so painful for him and so hard. But it was a gift. I am a different person. And I'm going to tell you the main thing, when people ask me, how have you changed the most? I don't give a shit if you like me. I just don't. I moved past that. I stopped thinking that I had to explain him or make apologies for him or try and prove that I was a good mother. I let go of all of that. Changed everything. It was a gift. And I think our whole family did that. And we're very forgiving with one another now. We're very respectful of our differences. We're no longer trying to make everyone behave in a certain way. I no longer have anything to do with my son's recovery. It's his recovery. It's his, and he's going to do what he's going to do. You know, I never lose sight of the fact that, of course, something could happen.
Yeah.
You know, you never forget that. But I'm not traumatized or triggered by that in the same way I used to be.
How long's he clean now?
It will be 10 years on Valentine's Day.
Oh, nice.
And his first child is due on Valentine's Day.
No
year.
kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Isn't that
awesome.
Exciting? Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What's your son's name?
Jamie.
Jamie. Congrats, Jamie.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll meet one day.
Yeah. No, I would love for you to meet him. He's very.
Where's he live?
He lives in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where at?
He's in Malibu, and he and his wife live there. Yeah.
I got a funny story about that, but I'll tell you after we record. Go ahead, Ben. You're up.
I'll just come out and say powerful testimony.
Oh.
Like that for whatever reason today, that's like pulling at my heartstrings. I ain't gonna lie, you can't see it on YouTube. Thank God we're not zoomed in. But for a second, my eyes started to water because I think so much of it hits home for me. Where there's a couple things I want to touch on, but you had said something a few minutes ago about you watched your son and you could see that he wanted it.
Yeah.
But it still took him another year and a half. So a lot of the times, and I'm going to base this off of what you were sharing and also what I've seen, like a lot of times it's all based in fear on the family side. Like imagine you're in constant fear of losing your son or daughter.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, a lot of times, this isn't always the case, but a lot of people's go-to is anger, right? And we have a tendency in working with families to see, like, why doesn't he just get it right?
Yeah.
But coming out and saying, like, you could see that he wanted it.
Yeah.
Because my mother said the same thing to me. And for me, it was, I wanted to be sober really bad.
Yeah.
And it took me another 8 years.
Yeah.
And there was even, she ended up sharing with me that, at one point on my journey, I was in a detox, and one of the therapist and the head medical director pulled my mom in. She went to visit for like a family check-in or whatever, and I wasn't privy to the conversation, but they basically told her, we've never seen someone who wants to be sober so bad that we have so little hope that they're going to stay sober.
Right.
And this is someone telling my mother this, and she told me this after the fact. And they made a recommendation to me at the time just to keep me alive, which was not in their regular policy, procedure, protocol, to have me go to methadone. Like they were completely anti-methadone, this place, but they were like, you just need to keep your kid alive.
Yep.
And it just really hit home for me and pulled at the heartstrings. And I want to emphasize that just because your loved one isn't getting it the first time doesn't mean they don't want it.
Right. Exactly. And it's a mistake. I mean, we do hear a lot of parents in our group saying, if you would just do this, we even had a parent who lost a child, and someone said, and the parent said, I guess he just didn't want it enough. And I right away was like, oh, no. He wanted it. He did not want to die. He did not want to die. He wanted his life to change. He wanted this. It's hard. God, it's hard. It's really, really hard. If we as parents can step back and understand that, also understand it's their journey, get them help. Couldn't really help my son because I don't have the lived experience of addiction. I don't. He needed to get that wisdom from elders, and that's what he did. And it was slow going, but he got it. But it was his own journey. It wasn't mine. I wasn't in control of it.
And I don't even need to meet Jamie to know that probably the chances are he is an amazing human being today.
He's unbelievable.
And which ties back to, oftentimes I hear addicts and alcoholics, and I tell our clients this all the time, me being an addict, I see it as a superpower today.
Yes.
And you came out and said that for your family, that his addiction ended up being a gift.
It was a gift.
And, I want to tie that because we have experiences here. We do a family weekend every 6 weeks or so where we run out a conference room, and I've brought this up on previous episodes. But you brought up your daughter as well and the way that fractured. And our therapist, Maya, is the one that heads it up, but we all show up and play a part. But we do all the family dynamics, and it's so interesting that, oftentimes, like you were saying, all your focus is on your son, negative. Here's daughter over here doing
everything right.
That's like my sister.
Yeah.
Doing everything she's supposed to be doing, and all the attention's on me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, what we end up seeing through family weekend, the reason, going back to your analogy about the broken bones come back stronger, what ends up happening, and the reason that having some, A, for me being in recovery, I see as a superpower. B, I believe you saying for Jamie, your son, that it was a gift to your family now that he's in recovery, is because we learn how to communicate.
Yes.
Better than families that don't go through this.
Exactly. And we learn to stop passing judgment, and we are incredibly humbled when we're part of this journey. Incredibly humbled. I needed to be knocked down at the knees.
There's one common conclusion that I end up hearing through the family weekend, and I'll ask, what did you get out of it? And so many of the parents will say, our family has never communicated in the way that we communicated today. Yeah. Like if your daughter was there coming out and being able in a safe space to say her part, like, hey, I was doing all these things, Mom, and you were, but you to come out and say your part and just where it's all said in love, but what people weren't able to get out, maybe they didn't know how to communicate, maybe they were in fear, which came out in anger or depression or the like.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I think if I'm not mistaken, you said your daughter just she was done and just stepped away.
Yeah. Oh, she did. She was done with all of us.
So she's protecting herself.
Right.
And, seeing that happen within the family weekend dynamic is exactly what's going on at LITT, it looks like.
Exactly.
Which is, it's a beautiful thing.
And it's slow, just like it is slow for the person in addiction to find their healing, and it's a process. It's also a process for parents. I don't give them this information in a meeting and they suddenly go, oh, I see the light. I'm fine now. They don't, they just don't. It's a process for them. They have to grow into it. They have to step back a little bit and look at it. And it's all a process. This healing is a process for the entire family, and everyone's going to move at their own pace. And that's okay. And we can't control them. It's funny, when you said your sister was the opposite of you, I see that a lot. And I had that too. My daughter smoked pot once in her entire life and called me when she did it, and she was 25 and said, this is stupid. So she is completely different from her brother. But one of the things that I held on to when my son was very sick is, as I was trying to examine how much of this was my fault, as we all do, was that how you raise your children really has nothing to do with how they turn out. I have 2 children completely opposite. You're born with a vulnerability to this disease.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this was we were talking prior to hitting record, and you had said something, because Tom and I face this all the time. I've actually sat here in this very room with parents who want their son or daughter in treatment, and what they bring up is, I need them to come here to Rock, and I need them, while they're at Rock, to enroll in college and start moving forward. Yeah. You said something earlier along the lines, I'd like you to explain it, but along the lines of like your plans for Jamie.
Versus my son's plans outcome for his own life. Yeah. So especially in the earlier, I've kind of broken this disease into 5 stages. And so there is a stage where you're like, if I can just get him to finish college, or I can just get him through this, then he'll be fine. He'll outgrow this. There's all these plans, but I had a plan. I raised a child who went to really good schools, who was going to go to college, was going to get a degree, was going to get a great job. Everything was going to be fine. And it was disrupted. College was disrupted by his addiction. It was disrupted much earlier, but it came to a head during college years. And I had a plan for my son, so I kept wanting to get him back on track. It doesn't work that way. It just does. It's not my plan. It's his plan. And he has an amazing, really rich, really wonderful life. He didn't finish college. He didn't, but he got healthy, and he worked his program, and he did what he needed to do, and his life is rich. It's not my life. It's his life. And parents often want to step in, especially when you have a child who you've spent a lot of time with them dabbling in addiction before it became a full-blown addiction, where we keep trying to get their life back on track for them, but it's the track we want them on. It just doesn't work that way. And those parents are really trying to take control of their children's life, and they need to let their children heal and find their own way. That's the best way to do it. And it's going to feel the best to the parent too. Once you let go of that and give them their life back, I handed the disease to my son. I reached a point where I said, this is your disease. I'm handing it back to you. You got this. And he did. You got this. And we need to get to that point as parents. Otherwise, we're going to always be on the edge. We're always going to be on the edge trying to micromanage our grown child's life. And it doesn't work that way. Is that the long answer for this for the short question?
No, that was good. Let me apologize, though, for the listeners. The lawn company evidently is here.
I could see Tom's face. This is one of his pet peeves.
Crazy. So my editing skills are good, but they ain't that good. So you're going to hear a blower in the background. And if you don't, then good. Or go get
Tom's
your ears
editing
checked.
skills are that good.
One thing I wanted to ask, Shawn, is you didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to hand this disease over to you.
Right.
There was a process in that. Mm-hmm. What did that look like for you?
I came to, first I had to understand that it wasn't my fault.
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
How did you come to that understanding?
Well, part of it was looking at both my children and realize, and part of it was letting go of the shame. That's another, because the shame comes from thinking this is my fault. I didn't control him enough when he was growing up. He was, I didn't punish him enough. I punished him too much. I was too hard on him. Looking at all the traumas that he went through, big and small, all of that, just digesting all of that. And then it was, I remember he relapsed. He'd been clean 90 days and he relapsed. And I said, you have to leave, because he was back in our house. And I said, you're going to have to leave. And he cried and he left for 24 hours. And then he came back and he just is crying. And he's like, I want this so badly. You have to believe me. And I'm like, I do believe you. I looked at him and I just knew he did not want to do what he was doing. I believed him. And that was a flip for me, that for the first time, I believed that this was not something he was doing to hurt me. I understood that this was separate from me. And that's a big step. So I think that's when I started to get it,
Did you come to that like on your own, or did you have like a therapist, or did you have anybody else?
There was nobody. I went to Al-Anon meetings for a while, and that was helpful. But there's no crosstalk, and that was hard for me.
Yeah.
And I needed I needed to connect with other parents, and I had no one to connect to. So yeah, and I spent a lot of time alone. My husband and I had gotten to the point where we were pretty much, for the most part, in separate houses. I mean, there was just...
Oh, really?
It got bad, and we do a check-in. Have you heard from him? There was that kind of thing. But once he came back home, we were back in the house together, and trying to understand. Another thing my son did that made me understand that he was trying was he would relapse, and then he would come to us and say, okay, I need to go. I've already called somebody. I'm gonna go to this place. And he went through 7 programs, different kinds of programs. But he was doing that on his own. So that also told me that he wanted this and was struggling with it. And that switched things in my head a little bit. Helped me detach a little bit from this is my fault, or I can control this for him. I realized then I couldn't, that he was starting to take the reins. And so I handed it back to him all the way. When he, I'll share this. So in learning to do this, I also was looking to go mend things with my daughter and find some joy there as well, and keep him separate so that he couldn't disrupt the joy that I had in other places in my life. So he had moved back to California. It had been a year and a half. He was in recovery again. It had been a year and a half that he'd been home and in and out of recovery. And he moved back to California, and he started using again. And my daughter, on the other hand, was in love, and it was Valentine's Day, and she got engaged. She called me that night, and she's very joyful, and I am joyful for her, and, we're so happy, and he keeps buzzing through on my phone. And I made a very conscious decision to stay in the joy, that whatever was going on with him in California could wait. Got off the phone from her, and he called right back, and he said, I need you. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I need help. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I need to go someplace with people who are not using. I need to get into a sober house. And I said, okay, well, what do you want from me? Will you help me get into someplace out here? Will you come out here? I need to see you. Now, at that moment, I felt very comfortable saying, absolutely, you know what you want. I'm following your lead. I will help you find a place. I flew out the next morning. I flew to California. It had been Valentine's Day when I got this call. I flew to California. He was in a hotel detoxing, stayed with him, and got him in a sober house the next day. And that was it. That was the last time that he used. But what struck me is I didn't tell him what to do. I didn't panic. I didn't pick up the phone when he called. I wasn't not loving him. I was loving him in a really healthy way and saying, you've got this. I trust you to know what you need to do. Do it. And I'll support you in your recovery. I'll come out there. I'll give you a hug. I'll take you around to the different sober houses. I'll be there while you make this choice, but it's not my illness anymore. I got my own illness with this, So
that's pretty impressive. Valentine's Day must be a pretty big deal
within our family.
Yeah, within your family.
We always laughed that it was the world's hokiest holiday, but now I love it.
Yeah. So when you interact with a new parent that maybe enters into the LITT program, or just you meet them organically somehow, and they come to you and they say, Shawn, I just lost a child. I don't know what to do. I don't find any purpose, at this stage of my life. My kids were my everything. How do you handle that?
Well, I am not the person that usually speaks with them. We have someone who does that. And it's rough. It's really rough. We do have a grief educator who we will often use her services to give some free one-on-one counseling, and then we get them into a group. What I will say with LITT's philosophy is that we recognize that grief isn't necessarily something you move through, like there's another side to it. It's something you move in. And that journey can feel a little better after some time, but these parents never shed that grief. They never shed it completely. But they do learn to, as I did when my son was sick, to appreciate the joys and involve themselves in the joys outside of that grief. So we always hope that we're opening their world back up again, because when you're in this grief, that's all you are in. You are in this black grief, and we see that. But there is a way to move into your life where you can hold on to the joys again, still carrying that grief. So our groups are really wonderful. Our grief group leaders have lived experience. They've all lost a child, and they have all been through training, and we do training over and over again. The groups are very tight. They're small and they're intimate, and these people stay in them for years. So we do the best we can. I mean, we can't take it away. We can't take the pain away.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. The 5 stages that you were referring to.
Yeah.
Let's get into that a little bit.
Okay. I can,
now let me say this though. I if you have something else that I'll just keep asking questions. If you have a certain direction that you want to go, then let me know. Huh?
Oh, we have sibling grief groups too.
Okay, yeah, we'll get there. Okay. Ben, remember, let me mark this. 39.
39 minutes.
39. I can cut this out. All right. Yeah, we'll talk about, let's get into the 5 stages a little bit, and then I'll go from there.
Okay, so I recognize these 5 stages because they are not only the stage that our addicted child is in, they are also the stage parents are often in when they come to us. So the first stage that I see is vulnerability, and that is the child or the preteen who is just vulnerable to this illness. We see patterns of anxiety in these kids. They've often been diagnosed with ADHD. You know, parents come into the group and say, this is what my kid was like as a child. I'm like, that's the vulnerability stage. Then we get to a stage that is sort of the, I call the dabbling with dependency, where they're partying. They're partying all the time, but it's not affecting their life too much yet. They're often in high school, but this stage I've seen start in college. They might miss work. They might have small periods of withdrawal where they've used heavily over the weekend, and then on Monday they've got the flu. You know, they've flu symptoms, or too tired to get out of bed. That's the dabbling dependency. We don't usually see parents at that point. Then we get to the addiction madness. They're all in. They need their whatever their substance is. They need it, and that is, we often get parents calling us at this point. My kid. Sometimes they're arrested. It's taken over their life. This is who you're treating. Yeah. That's the stage 3, as I see it. Stage 4 is where they want recovery, but they can't do it. So they've moved past the stage where they're saying, I don't have a problem. And when parents come to us in stage 3 and say, but she doesn't think she has a problem, I'm like, there's not a whole lot we can do but teach you some coping skills, teach you to condense your message to them, to stop trying to prove to her she has a problem, all of these things. So we talk to parents about how to deal with someone who does not know they have an illness, does not want to admit they have an illness. When they move into stage 4, which is I want help, that's a different ballgame. Then your relationship with them may not be so much about trying to keep them alive as supporting recovery without playing the game, without jumping into their life for them. We talk about codependency and that kind of thing, but basically you need to trust that your child does want recovery, and you need to know, can they do this alone yet, or do I still need to run alongside the bicycle and keep them from falling over? And there's a letting go. And so we have a lot of parents that come in then. And I think that long-term recovery, which is the last stage, is something you're never really going to sit with 100%. You're not going to know 2 years later or 3 years later for sure that this will never happen again. My son, it'll be 10 years. I don't think he's ever going to relapse, but I don't know. It is his life. and he will manage it, and he has the tools. But that third and fourth stage where your child denies any problems and then moves into another stage where they're asking for help, but they're not all in yet. Those are the tricky points for parents. Those are the really tricky ones.
There's a saying in recovery, we have the only disease that tells us we don't have it. Yeah. It has to be self-diagnosed.
Yes.
If badgering your loved one that they have a problem is a losing battle.
It is.
You're going to be wasting your time, your energy. It's going to get you frustrated.
Right. And I do think that shame can be the worst thing that we can put on our addicted children when they're 100%. Active in their addiction. And I do think that shame might be at the root of some relapses. I don't know. You guys would probably know better than I do. But I think that I have seen parents, they don't mean to, shame their child. Remember all the terrible things you did to us? You can't go back to that. You can't do that again. I don't like this choice you're making in your life because it suggests to me that you're going to do X again. That kind of thing is really self-defeating.
Yeah, I would say that, I don't know, I'm sure it could definitely cause relapse. But one thing that it definitely does is it doesn't, that relationship won't heal to the point of its fullest capacity, I suppose, Look at your own experience, your son has 2-3 years and you look through the lens of, oh, congratulations, you got 2-3 years, but you were still a fuck up.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it doesn't allow that relationship to flourish.
Right.
Ben, that might be a first I've ever said the F-bomb on a podcast.
I think so.
I'm going to have to click that explicit button on YouTube. But you know what? That is a direct result of family members and parents not doing what they need to do.
Right.
And a lot of times people get this misconstrued that it is, and there's people listening right now that probably are like, well, it's, my loved one, it's their problem.
Yeah.
Well, and if that's the mindset that you're going to have around it, then this relationship and everything, it will never flourish. You're always going to be pointing the finger at one another. You're constantly going to be a race to see who can win the medal of victim first, and it's unfortunate. And ultimately what it does, it just, people have this I don't give a shit type attitude, both on the person that's in recovery and the loved ones themselves, and if that's the way that it's going to be, that's fine. But I got sober. A big part of me getting sober was because I didn't have any relationships anymore. Nobody wanted to be my friend. My dad threw me out the damn house. I had nobody.
Right.
And I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. I backed myself into a corner.
Yeah.
My dad told me, you don't have to. The saying, you can't stay here, but you got to go somewhere. You can't stay here, blah, blah, blah. He threw me out the house, essentially.
Yeah.
And he said, I made a phone call to a treatment center and you can go. 3 hours later, I was on a plane.
Yeah.
Now, my dad doesn't have a bad bone in his body. He never assumed, well, there were periods of time where he would make snide comments, but it was out of frustration and stuff like that. And I grew up, it was just me and my dad, so, but he was never the type of person that assumed responsibility for my alcoholism.
Oh, that's interesting.
No. And honestly, I don't know. I think that he just was kind of like, hey, I did the best I can with the cards that I've been dealt. You're screwing up.
He probably had a stronger sense of self than a lot of us do.
I think so. I think so. And, it's good. And even still to this day, our relationship prior me getting sober was obviously very rocky. Once I got sober, our relationship started flourishing.
Right.
But he never once ever threw anything at me when I was sober. Not one time did he ever bring up anything from when I was using.
Yeah.
And I think that's very respectful.
Yes, it is. You're very
because
lucky.
I know the shit I did. A lot of it's documented. So
going back to you brought up shame and relapse, and the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about this, and does shame and maybe depression, all that play a role? Yes. And, I can speak for myself where like I would tell you whether it was true or not that it was shame, it was this, it was that. But one of the best things that can happen is when someone like me throws our hands up in the air and says, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know why I keep doing this. Yep. That I don't know was probably one of the most important things that ever came out of my mouth. Because I can sit there and try to evaluate, and any addict will. You ask them why they relapse, they'll give you 100 alibis.
Yeah.
Well, because of this, my dog died.
Yeah,
The landlord was being a jerk. And at the end of the day, when we finally admit to ourselves like that we're completely lost and puzzled, is when I think we're really, we might feel the most lost. Right. But in reality, I believe it's the first time we're taking a step in the right direction.
And along those same lines, I wonder, I'm curious with you, I know I've seen this with my son and some of his friends, many of his friends, when they stop going back to what used to be referred to, I don't know if it still is, the inciting incident that caused their illness, when they stop referencing that and they're like, for instance, my son had some trauma in middle school and we would talk about it and he'd say, I don't believe there was an inciting incident for me. He said, I would have been a drug addict one way or the other. Or he was prescribed oxycodone as an 18-year-old for long term, and that's when the heroin kicked in, the heroin addiction. But he said, I think I would have been in the same boat eventually. So he sees himself as having been vulnerable, but he's not attaching his illness to an incident anymore.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll throw it out there. I've been through. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on here, but yeah, I've been through some sexual trauma myself at the age of 10. Well, I won't go into the details now. I don't mind at some point if it ever comes.
You've talked about it before,
but
not in detail. But.
Yeah, not in detail. But for me, there was one time in particular. I don't know why this is ingrained in my mind. I remember my mom. Like I was off somewhere for days. My mom found me. She was driving me back to her house. I was high on alcohol, crack, and roxycodone, and I just remember like I was so angry, and I'm telling her I did this because I was molested.
Right.
And the reality of the situation is like that was me protecting my disease.
Yes.
And giving again an alibi, an excuse. I like your son, from what it sounds like. I don't tie my addiction or alcoholism, and I think you said it so well earlier. When you drew the correlation between you raised both your daughter and your son, and one ended up going this way.
Right.
Same household.
Yeah.
I think that applies to this as well, where it could have gone either way. But I will tell you, it is in a active addict's best interest, in light of protecting their disease, to utilize that stuff as ammunition. Yeah. Well, this is why, Mom, and this is why, Dad.
And we do it too as parents.
Correct.
I have parents saying, if I could just figure out what caused it, then I could stop it. I could fix it. I mean, I had a parent searching for sexual trauma in her child's past because she thought if she could find that incident and address it, that he would no longer be an addict. Oh, I mean, and that's where we go because we're looking, parents are so desperate to find the cause. They're so desperate to do that. We can't help but feel like if we find the cause, we can fix it. But that's
I won't get too crazy into it right now, but this is where, since we referenced Joe and Charlie earlier, if you go to the Joe and Charlie tapes and listen to Doctor's Opinion on that, I think it's 25, 30 minutes. It talks about the disease model and the physical side of this, where we have an allergy to alcohol. It goes into the breakdown of acetaldehyde. And essentially, there's a lot of science that backs it up today, even further. But the fact that we're addicts and alcoholics has to do with the way that our body reacts on a physiological level, biological level, versus the root causes that we're looking for.
Right.
The cause is the fact that when I drink alcohol, I get the phenomenon of craving, which has to do with the way that my body metabolizes alcohol. Like in the easiest explanation, some people are allergic to peanuts, some people aren't. It literally has to do with the way the body metabolizes it.
And that's what my son says that a lot as well. I have an allergy to this, and I can't bring it into my life.
I think a really easy example for the listeners, and I tell our clients this all the time, and you can apply this to any drug. I just don't want to get stuck on the topic. But for instance, Adderall. You brought up ADHD earlier. You give Adderall, which is amphetamine, which is one carbon molecule different from methamphetamine.
Right.
It's speed. Right? It's speed. If you give it to someone with ADHD, it calms them down. If you give them to a normal person, it speeds them up.
Right.
Same drug, two different effects. I just like using that example so it can hit home
That's
to people.
a great example.
That the same drug might affect two people differently. Alcohol is supposed to be a depressant. Me, you give me a couple drinks and I'm like ready to run a marathon. I'm that guy sprinting down the road like a madman versus like, oh, time to go to sleep.
Yeah.
My body digests it differently.
I just want to give my 2 cents on the inciting incident that you were referring to. This is something too that Ben and I notice, and obviously we work in this space. We've worked in this space for a long time. With that comes being surrounded by therapists, right? And we have a therapist in the room. She's off camera, but after, maybe you can give your opinion on this too. A lot of times, somebody comes in to treatment. Let's just reference your son. He's been in treatment 7 times. Okay. And he has a primary therapist. And I hear more times than I care to admit. And I'll ask a very simple question. Why do you think they keep relapsing? And I'll get a therapeutic answer of what's their trauma? Well, they're sick. I get that. Right. I understand. But at what point, and Ben and I talked about this on an episode not long ago, if you've been to 7 different treatment centers, you're not getting 7 different modalities of therapy. It's probably going to be CBT, DBT, some EMDR, basic talk therapy. They're not reinventing the wheel here.
Right.
You have what your trauma is. You know what you've been through. You've lived it. Yes, you're sick in a sense. You are. You've been given ample opportunities through the therapeutic process to figure this out and to work through it. It's not for lack of resources. So you have all the knowledge in the world, of your trauma and everything. At what point do you make a change and you make a conscious decision? Now there's the action piece. I can't uncover any more trauma.
Right.
The trauma's there. I get it. I understand. At what point you have to have the action piece. So to take that back to the inciting incident, what good does it do?
Yeah.
We can always come up with, and I did the same thing that you did. I'd come home drunk, smash drunk. And my dad would start barking at me and yada, yada, yada. And I would blame my mom and my sister, who my mom left when I was 2 years old. She took my sister when I was, and my sister was 1. And here I am, 25 years old, coming home in a complete blackout. And now all of a sudden I want to pull my mom and sister card.
Mom didn't want me. That's why I'm like this. Yeah.
So I don't say that to discredit, trauma and people. Like, obviously that stuff is very important, but I have a hard time rationalizing somebody that's been to treatment multiple times and cast blame on incidents that has happened potentially decades ago. And
I will say the hurt is there. And hurt might be at the bottom of your addiction.
Absolutely.
Hurt is there. But if what you're saying is if I can't fix the hurt, I can't get well. No, that's not true. We may not be able to fix this hurt, but you can get well. You can. It's hard. This is not easy, but you can get well.
Yeah.
So this is one of my pet peeves with watching, and you can apply this to, in my opinion, what makes a good therapist, what makes a good, for instance, sponsor in a 12-step program or a good treatment center, is so many places, professionals, for whatever reason, get stuck on who did it to me, what they did, and how it made me feel. I mean, how often do we hear from a therapist, how did that make you feel? What makes a good therapist, in my opinion, is definitely that's part of the process. Who did it, what they did, how it made me feel. The good therapist is going to take you, okay, this is how you feel. what's the plan?
Exactly.
What are we doing about it?
Yeah, perfect.
Because I feel like we identifying how we feel for so many professionals is like the end goal. When it's not, like Tom's talking about. It's like, what is the action that's going to make the change?
And that applies to the parents as well. When a parent can say to the person, and what are you going to do about it? Instead of, here, I'll tell you what you're going to do about it, which is what we often do in the earlier stages with our child. Here, I'll give you a plan. Here's what you're going to do. Yes, we may have to be the one that gets them into recovery somewhere. We may have to set that up. We may have to encourage them to do that. But once our child starts this journey, the question should be, and what are you going to do about it? When they call you at home and say, I don't like what my therapist said, or they're telling me I need to get a job, or they're telling me I can't work this job, or I got a new roommate, or, what are you going to do about it? We can't fix it for them.
And I really hope, and this is probably not reality and not going to happen, but we need to learn from other people's mistakes. To our listeners, I'm literally working with a family right now. We had a past client here. I won't say whether male or female or whatever, but 2 years ago. And we gave all the suggestions on the family end because she ended up going back out. Providing the townhouse to live in, the car, paying the car insurance, paying all this stuff. And we're like, you got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's, if the addict alcoholic doesn't have to provide anything for themselves, that's plenty of time to drink and drug. And also all their own resources are going to go to acquiring those drinks and those drugs. But finally, after 2 years, we've been corresponding again. And it's like, now they're doing all those things, saying, not welcome back at the townhouse. The car is in the rears. Not that they can't help with it. They can't. Not that they can't afford to, but they finally, after 2 years, realize what that was doing. And sometimes I'm just like, God,
it's a slow learning curve, isn't it?
It is so slow. But we all have to have our experience.
Yeah.
And, my sponsor always said to me, Ben, you can't deny people their experience.
Yeah.
You have to sometimes even
I got to remember that for my parents.
Sometimes even as a professional, because I have all this knowledge, both personal, professional. So I have to remember too, even with our clients, like, all right, that's where they're at. They're not doing the right thing. But I look back at my own journey. How often did I not do the right thing?
Yeah.
And it helped me get to where I'm at today. How often did my mom not do the right thing? You remind me of my mom, like, to a T, just throwing that out there.
I'm everybody's mom.
You all three of you would hit it off. Like. But there was one other thing I wanted to bring up on a separate note. In
all
regards
right, hurry up, though,
to
because we got to wrap this up.
I'll be quick. All right. You brought up, probably 15 minutes ago now, you went to Al-Anon for a little bit, and you said there's no crosstalk. And then you referenced LITT. That there is. This is my take on it. I love the fact that, and what we're referring to is crosstalk in Al-Anon, is you're not allowed to like ask each other questions and give feedback to somebody else's share. Where with LITT, my experience and Tom's with it, we did do a Zoom with you all, where it is questions. I feel like, and this goes for 12-step stuff too, is for alcoholics and addicts, but showing up to a meeting, if you're not getting to crosstalk, you got to get with somebody like after the meeting.
Right.
Where I really like what you're saying about LITT, because in my opinion, the important part is that you're making the relationships.
Right.
Right off the bat, you brought up you met another mother who has lost a son to addiction, and you two are meeting up for coffee. Where the real power, in my opinion, there was in the relationship.
Exactly, because this is a solo gig for most parents. Correct.
So I really feel like, while Al-Anon, 12-step programs, I love them, 100%, but it almost seems like in a way that LITT and formats like that make it easier to connect.
It did, and Al-Anon did help me understand I wasn't alone, but I still wasn't making the connections. So I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting going, please God, don't let me see anyone I know.
Oh, yeah?
We're all there for the same reason. And who did I see? My neighbor, and her son and my son had done heroin together, So, small world. But I still wasn't feeling like I was making the connections. It did make me feel a little less alone, though, that I realized there were other parents dealing with this. So,
and we see that here with our clients. All humans are the same, whether you're on the addict side or you're the family, because we see that with our clients too, where they'll build awesome relationships here because of the group setting.
Right.
And groups, you can crosstalk, you can ask questions, and it's designed that way. 12-step programs are designed specifically not to be that way, and there's good reasons for it with their traditions, which I won't get into. But then our clients have a hard time taking what they've done here and built the same way they built relationships here. They've got to be able to do
it on
the outside too, and it correlates exactly to what the families go through too.
So and one of the things, if we have time to just say, one of the things that I love about my group, now this is not the grief groups, including our sibling grief group, everyone stays in that group. We have the same members in that group meeting for years. In my group, people come and go. They come into our group meetings. They may come for 4 or 5. Then their child goes in the recovery. They're exhausted. They say, I don't want to deal with this for a little while. He's there for 30 days. I'm not coming to a meeting. And that's okay. Or they feel like they are solidly in recovery and they're not going to come to meetings for a while. And then they drop back in when there's a crisis again. And that's okay. We are good with that. We just want you to know that you can make the connections. And when you come to our meeting, you, unlike a group that might happen here, you will see new parents coming in who are in the very beginning of this, and you will see parents whose child have been in recovery a couple years, but they're still struggling with some fears and doubts. So you're going to see all the different stages. So when your child relapses, for instance, if you're in a group like yours where all the parents start at point A, and now they're at point B, and now they're out in the world. And even if the group is still meeting, if somebody's child relapses, it's instantaneous shame. I don't belong in the group anymore. My child relapsed. I'm not part of the group. Everyone else is doing fine, and I'm not, and my kid's not. So in our group, what is really nice is that we're at all these different stages, and we respect that, and we understand that. If that makes sense,
I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I feel guilty, like when I talk to parents, and I'm like, I know that their kids in it, and they're in the trenches. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm coming up on 13 years. And when they look at me and say, "Oh, congratulations," like part of me is like, "Oh." Yeah. Like I
have survivor's guilt. Yeah. Especially because we have this whole grief program. I've always had survivor's guilt, and the hardest, it always comes home to me when a parent thinks that when we have these things, you survived because you were meant to do something special. I hate that, and my son hates that. There's a lot of people that died who were meant to do something special. Living through this disease is not a gift. It's not, you haven't been chosen because you lived through this. You were just damn lucky, and that's true. I really hate to see when parents think that maybe their child wasn't special enough. That's why their child didn't make it. That's really painful. That's really painful to watch. And we do that. We tend to do that. People around us will do that. People who know this disease may understand it a little more, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think this is a pretty impactful episode. What do you think, Ben?
I really do. I'll be honest. What's going through my head is, and I didn't realize this coming into it, but on a personal level, for me, I'm still in touch with a number of families who have lost a child. Mm-hmm. Maybe they came to Rock at some point, or I know them from Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. I just actually missed a celebration of life this past weekend that I couldn't make it to for somebody that I was linked up with through Al-Anon. But I'm really glad that we're here today with you, because to know that there's a resource, because I'm always helping the people that are trying to get into recovery.
Right.
But I have a lot of, there is a family, I'll just share this. It's kind of personal, but it is what it is. For instance, there's a family that comes down a couple times a year from New Jersey to watch my son play football. Mm-hmm. And their son passed away a year and a half ago and was a big football player and stuff. So it's just like, it hurts watching families go through that pain. And I know for me, I feel helpless, like there's nothing I can ever say. But what you said today, that there are resources that they can learn to live in the joy, I took that in today, so I got something out of it. So thank you.
You know, those of you who have been through recovery and are living drug-free and alcohol-free, you have so many losses. You have so many losses. I am always struck by, I'm never surprised when my son calls and tells me he's lost someone. And I really admire the courage that you have to keep on helping people. And it would be easy to just be discouraged and walk away or be overcome with the sadness. But there's a lot of losses in this community. Really, people that had a lot of potential and we've lost for no damn good reason.
Well, one of the sad things is, and I'm very open about this, you at some point become kind of desensitized to it.
Yeah, I guess
it's unfortunate.
I haven't reached that point yet, but
in our space, I'll say, there's a week doesn't go by where we didn't hear about somebody that we knew on some level,
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel guilty about that it just,
But it's like being a commander in an army. You're going to have losses, and you have to move past them. But.
Well, like I'm with Ben. Sometimes I'm like, man, why didn't that impact me as much as I thought it, or at least that I think it should?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have a good answer for it, other than I just,
You keep saving lives.
Yeah, I mean, you see the people that you do good for,
right?
And that overshadows. Of course, people. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow,
right?
That's the thing. Addiction. It's something that Ben and I have worked on the front lines for a long time. We've seen it all. When you think you've seen it all, you haven't, but
we've seen a lot. Yeah.
It's one of those things that we just continue putting our best foot forward and, helping as many people as we can.
Yeah.
And it ties into what I was talking about earlier. No matter how much knowledge or personal or professional experience I have, I shared about this in my home group a couple weeks ago. For me, it comes out in anger. When people are dying, because what I have in my head is there's a solution.
Yeah.
This is there, and it's right at their fingertips. And for me, and I'm not mad at the addict. I'm angry at the disease.
Yeah.
I'm not angry at people, human beings as individuals, but I think my anger comes from I've experienced this solution, and it's right at my finger. It's at everybody's fingertips, and I'm just like, oh,
you want them to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it no matter how much knowledge, experience you have, having those feelings is okay. You're not a failure if you feel angry that your loved one is relapsing or whatever the case is. We got to move past the how we feel part and what are you going to do about it now. But you're not a failure for feeling the way that you feel.
Yeah.
Let's take 1 minute and talk just for 1 minute about the Undo the OD program, because that's pretty cool.
So we have an Undo the OD program that puts, we are certified by the state of Maryland as an opioid response team. I might have the language wrong. And so we put free Narcan in bars and restaurants, college campuses, dormitories, all over the state of Maryland. And we are saving lives with this program. We train everyone how to use it. We have ambassadors in various counties in Maryland, so we can who also go into the bars and restaurants in their county and train people, and then leave them Narcan. We keep track of it, so we know when it's expired, so we can replace it for them. But it's been an amazing program, and there's a lot of interest, especially on college campuses. So we're just trying to keep people alive. First week or so that we had it in one of our local bars, a life was saved right in the bar. The bartender recognized an overdose and saved a life. So it works. Have Narcan. If you have teenagers, have Narcan. Have Narcan in your house. You don't know what's happening at the sleepovers at your house.
Yeah. I have Narcan in my house because my dad's on opiates. And if my kids ever were to get one on accident, they're 7, 5, and 4. So if they thought it was like a Tic Tac or something,
Yeah.
But it's put away. They can't get to it. But you never know. You never know. My son, he's like Spider-Man. He scales the walls.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so and we'll wrap up with this, between LITT, Loving in the Trenches, and Undo the OD, are these non-for-profits?
Love in the Trenches is a nonprofit. It takes a lot of money to be free. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Yes, and Undo the OD is underneath our LITT umbrella.
So if somebody wants to assist in a donation or whatever the case is, how could they do that?
Go to loveinthetrenches.org, and there is a donation button there. And I can tell you, we are really smart. The money really does go to taking care of, creating programs that make a difference, that really make a difference. Like, we wouldn't be able to offer free private grief therapy sessions if we didn't have donations and things like that. So, and we do lots and lots of training. No one just comes into this and says, hey, I want to run a group. They are trained and continue to be trained, and it's expensive training to get the best people in there. So yes, if you, and we occasionally are able to help people cover some costs with recovery. We have a very small fund for that, but we can do that. So if you want to donate, that would be wonderful.
Great.
Yeah.
Ben, any final thoughts?
No, this was... I'm feeling it in my heartstrings. That's all I got to say. So
I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. I'm happy to meet both of you. We love your podcast. So many of our people listen to it. So.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us info@realrecoverytalk.com. Right, Ben? Info.
Yes, sir.
@realrecoverytalk.com. And if you have anything if you want to talk some smack on Ben, my email is still available, tom@realrecoverytalk.com. That just comes straight to me, or vice versa. If you want to talk smack on me, send it to Ben.
Don't talk smack on me.
No, don't talk smack on Shawn. Shawn's doing some good work over here. So in the end, ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.